This is Dr. Michael Guth. In 2011, I was invited to speak at an executive forum on diabetes practice management, and my talk was actually divided into two parts. This video applies to part 2, which is food as drug delivery technology. My affiliation is I am Director of Health Economics and Outcomes Research for Risk Management Consulting in Oak Ridge, Tennessee. My talk is based on the wonderful book, The Zone, A Dietary Road Map by Barry Sears, Ph.D., with Bill Lawren. The book is available on Harper audio tape. My talk is also based on my own health economics and outcomes research. The Zone, Balancing Protein and Carbohydrates. The standard advice people often hear of eat less fat, eat more fruits and vegetables is actually wrong advice. Eating fat does not make you fat. It is hard to lose weight simply by restricting calories. Diets based on choice restriction and limited calories usually fail. Losing weight has little to do with willpower. The biochemical effects of food have been constant for the past 40 years. Our body fat is governed by macronutrient consumption. The macronutrients are protein, carbohydrates, and fats. Most dietary guidelines will tell you to eat plenty of carbs. All carbs are simple sugars linked in polymer chains. Any carbs that are not used by the body will be stored as glycogen. For muscles, it is inaccessible, and for the liver, it is accessible. Once liver storage of glycogen is full, excess carbs have only one fate. They are converted to excess fat. I sometimes hear athletes and people who run long distances say that they're going to load up on carbs before they begin their workout. And what they need to understand is that the carbs are not replenishing the muscles that are being strained and torn during the workout. The carbs are providing the body with sugar, and that sugar will be metabolized and provide energy. But once you exceed what the body can absorb in a period of time, those carbs will be stored as excess fats. The cascade of glucose problems. Meals high in carbohydrates yield a rapid rise in serum glucose. The high glucose, in turn, causes a release of insulin from the pancreas. Insulin is a storage hormone. It has evolved over time to put aside excess carbs into fat, and it aggressively promotes the storage of fat. Insulin was very important during the early days of man, the caveman times, when people would eat and then experience a long period of basically starvation while they looked for new food. Having fat stored up there was essential to the survival of our species. But today, eating carbs sends a hormonal message into your body, and that message is store fat. Even worse, increased insulin tells the body not to release any of its stored fat. That makes it impossible for the body to use its own stored fat for energy. Everyone should know what the glycemic index is. It is an index that talks about the rate of sugar entry into the blood. Every person who has seen a primary care physician should have received a message by now about glycemic index and eating low glycemic foods. If you have not received that message from your own doctor, you need to ask about it or consider finding a new doctor. If the glycemic index is a measure of how fast sugar enters the blood, what does it depend on? It depends on the structure of simple sugars in the food. It depends on the soluble fiber content of the food, the fat content. All complex carbohydrates must be broken down into simple sugars to be absorbed. There are only 3 common sugars in carbohydrates. These 3 are glucose, which comes from grains, pasta, starches, and vegetables, fructose, which comes from fruit, and galactose, which comes from dairy products. Of these 3, only glucose can be released directly into the bloodstream, and it causes a sprint to a spike. Here is a new concept for most of the viewers of this video. Every morsel of food that you put in your mouth and ingest causes a hormonal response. Hormones regulate virtually everything the body does, from controlling glucose levels to survival mechanisms. The insulin-glucagon opposites pairing relates to the glucagon causes a release of glucose, stored carbs, from the liver. Glucagon is stimulated by dietary protein. So if you eat a meal high in protein, you will cause a release of glucagon, and that has a negative effect, sort of the opposite of what insulin would do. Food is the most powerful drug a person will ever encounter. We each need to learn how to control the body's unintended hormonal responses to food. The zone recommendations are to eat small meals with proper ratio of proteins to carbs every time. 0.75 is ideal. That means you're eating 3/4 of as many grams of proteins as you are grams or servings of carbs each time. But if you don't get that magic number of 0.75, anywhere in the range of 0.6 to 1.0 is still zone favorable. But note, that means you never eat a meal that is just carbs. So we have been taught, for example, to eat an apple, to eat a piece of fruit, eat some vegetables. You would always want to consume some protein. They might be mixed nuts or they might be meat along with those carbs in order to preserve the correct insulin-glucagon hormonal message. Exercise stimulates hormonal changes in a favorable way. It causes the release and burning of fats. Fat are more efficient resource of energy, twice as efficient as carbohydrates. In the zone, maximum fat is released as needed. Outside the zone, if you're eating too many carbs, fat becomes accumulated even with exercise. That is, you eat carbohydrates, you cause the release of insulin. Insulin tells the body, store fat, and it is going to store fat whether you are exercising or not. People should combine aerobic exercise with weight-bearing exercise. The latter causes the release of human growth hormone to repair muscle damage and uses stored body fats. When we receive dietary advice from the government, it most often looks like this diagram shown on the next slide. We see on this particular plate 3/4 of the meal portion are given to carbohydrates, and protein is just a smaller 1/4 portion. That gives carbohydrates a 3-to-1 ratio to proteins, and in fact we want proteins to be almost equal, maybe a little bit less than carbs, but almost equal to them. Off to the right we see a place for dairy. That would normally be a glass of milk. People need to understand that dairy is one of the best sources of low-density lipoproteins. So when you get your cholesterol results, if your LDL numbers are consistently high, you need to consider dropping dairy from your diet. I have also heard from people that dairy was the source or cause of them having high blood pressure or hypertension. People with hypertension should at least give it a try. Eliminate dairy from your diet and see what effect that has on the hypertension. My next slide has a rather bold title. It says, "Starches are poison, especially for diabetics." People who have diabetes and continue to eat any starch are electing to eat more of the poison that is killing them. The real answer is to stop eating any starch, not just cut down. There are various glycemic indexes available for food, and they're put out by different organizations. On this slide, I cite one from the website health.harvard.edu, and it shows that a baked potato has an average glycemic index of 85. It's usually around the 0 to 100 scale, but sometimes they exceed 100. White bread is 73, whole wheat bread is 71, white rice 64, white spaghetti boiled 20 minutes is 61. The point is, there are 4 white foods that are very high in starch, and these should be avoided like the plague. They are white bread, white pasta, white rice, and white potatoes. The potatoes, of course, are not just baked potatoes, but French fries, mashed potatoes, and tater tots. Any of those potato products must be avoided. They are high in starch and cause spikes in glucose. As a summary, the foundation for a glycemic favorable diet is drug delivery technology, not standard nutritional admonitions. The main concern in eating food is controlling the rate of the drug. In this case, the drug could be protein or carbohydrates or fats, entry into the bloodstream. What people should strive for is to eat adequate protein, a low fat, and a carbohydrate moderate diet. We need to change attitudes towards food. Food is more than something to eat for pleasure or to appease hunger. Food is the most important drug you will consume at least 3 times per day for the rest of your life. Every item of food should be consumed with a view to how it will affect the insulin-glucagon balance. I hope you have enjoyed this video. My contact information is now shown on the screen. You can reach me by email at mike@michaelguth.com. My website is michaelguth.com, and my phone number is 865-483-8309. Please do not hesitate to contact me if you have any questions about these slides. This is actually one of my favorite topics to discuss, and I'm always happy to hear from new or interested viewers. Thank you. Goodbye.